Hello again, and on to the next panel discussion. And in this session, we really want to get into the crux of it and understanding the importance of cross-sector collaboration, the strategies for creating shared value within the supply chain, and hopefully we can get a chance to share some of the success stories of collaborating in leading to sustainability. So without wasting any further time, I'd like to introduce the panel, starting with Elizabeth Chwenkufabu. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Founder and CEO of North Africa Cameroon. You can wave to our delegates there. And then we've got Godfrey Rantshabeng, Head of Supply Chain, Botswana Agricultural Marketing Board. And then we've got Tzippora Nusbaum. Hope that pronunciation was perfect. Founder for Fix the Chain in Ghana. And then we also have Arran Kamungeremu. I hope that pronunciation went well. Strategic Sourcing and Logistics Manager, Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation. And then we also have Mary Ann Karanja, Head of Supply Chain, Africom in Kenya. So that's our panelists. I'll give them a chance just to briefly tell us something interesting about themselves and introduce them, and then we'll go in straight into our topic for the day. Starting with you, Tzippora.
I believe we missed Hepsy, though.
We missed?
Am I not correct? I believe we missed. Am I?
Yeah, can you please? Yeah, you can go. Yeah.
No, we missed somebody in the introduction.
We missed Hepsy in the introduction.
Yes.
Oh, apologies. Hepsy Mkhungo as well joining us. Apologies for that.
I'm sorry. So I should give a quick...
Tzippora, you can... Yeah, please.
A quick introduction of Fix the Chain and one sentence of who we are?
Something interesting, yeah, please.
Something interesting. I mean, I think that using mushrooms as a way to get out of extreme poverty is pretty interesting. Many people don't know that you can do that. That just from something as simple as that, you can make some really big change in the world.
Thank you. Elizabeth, over to you.
Something interesting, I believe what we wear is our vibe, and we can use fashion to change economy, to improve our economy and make our lives better.
Thank you. Arran, over to you.
Thank you so much. Something interesting that I would want to share with colleagues, just for programming professionals, to claim seats in the boardroom. I think that is something that is very special for the procurement professionals.
And then Godfrey, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Okay, can you hear me now? Hello, everybody. Something interesting. I've never really been asked that question before, but I think actually look taller than I am in real life. I think that's probably one thing that is interesting about me. So, yeah.
Thank you. And then Hepsy, over to you.
Morning, everyone. Something interesting about, suppose me or my company. Prior to COVID, I didn't know anything about cloud technology. And now we are deep into cloud technology as a business. That's interesting.
Yeah, we've definitely moved forward with the changes COVID. So jumping straight in, and I'm going to pick on you, Tzippora. I just want you to lead us and just give us in your books, what is a sustainable supply chain?
I'm so glad you asked. I think that a sustainable supply chain comes down to recognizing that it's not only about the items, it's not only about the sourcing, it's about the people as well. So you're telling a full story, meaning sustainability is the who, the what, the where, the how, all wrapped together into one very holistic package of transparency and respect. When you've got that, whatever business you're in, I think then you're off to a really strong start towards sustainability. And I'm kind of intentionally being a bit vague because there are people here from all aspects of the supply chain, from all types of sourcings, all types of, it doesn't really matter. Because if you respect the people at the source, if you respect the resources that are required to do what you have to do, then you're probably going to be sustainable. So I would say that the holistic, person-centered, respectful approach would be my most succinct way of describing a sustainable supply chain.
Quite interesting. And then, Elizabeth, just from your views, what strategies do you think organizations can employ to create that shared value in their supply chains?
Thank you. Thank you, Thato. I think a successful business is one that, exists in a thriving community. So I believe that strategies that organizations can employ to create shared value in their supply chains is collaboration, partnerships with their local, communities. As we say, to create shared value is that everybody moves along at the same time, because traditionally it has been businesses making profit at the expense of the communities where they operate in. But right now, that has changed, and for a business to be successful, its community or the communities or its value chain must be as successful as it is. And also, changing the social aspect of it and making it, calling it value, I think it puts, the focus on the matter. And the strategies that can be employed, I see them as, number one, as partnerships. Organizations need to really increase their partnerships with local communities. I, for example, I'm a business and I'm an entrepreneur. I deal in African fabric and stuff. It's very important for me to build very strong partnerships with local artisans and cooperatives, because that collaboration is important. I don't want to restart the wheel. Somebody has already done it. There are organizations out there, non-governmental organizations working with artisans, trying to develop them. I come in now to give them a gateway to the market. And that collaboration and partnership is really important. And also, as businesses, I think we should engage, nonprofit organizations. They're doing loads of work, on the field, working for donor organizations like the governments, the UN, and whatever. So there's a lot of work that's been done, and I think businesses should tap into that. Businesses should collaborate and work with the non-governmental organizations, so we don't reinvent the wheel. Because what I notice is that when I started out, I wanted to go create my own NGO and, to start a community of women to start working. Meanwhile, somebody else has already done that. So it's really to tap into those resources and work. And also educate. Organizations have to have strong educational programs and workshops, to teach the communities, number one, internal, for them to change, educate themselves on how they can have sustainable supply chains, and also to implement the shared value. They really need to change, their business model and how they view things. And sustainability should be a key thing, to the leadership. It should be in the DNA of the business. It's like it's a make or break. If there's no sustainability, it doesn't work. I do that. I deal in African print. Traditionally, African print is printed by wax printing. Entails a lot of chemicals because they dye each color at one go, and the process, it's chemical intensive. So now I opt for digital printing. Less carbon footprint, but it's more eco-friendly than the traditional one. But my clients, people, the market doesn't understand that. They prefer the wax printing because the ink penetration is deep and intense, and that's what they prefer. But we need to educate people that this is a safer option. We're preserving tomorrow today if we choose those options. And I also feel that collaboration within the industry, people should collaborate. That's a very strong strategy, because everybody's doing their own thing in their own corner. But if people group together, pool together, I'm exporting goods to the north, you're also exporting goods to the north. So rather than me putting a truck, we could collaborate and share, and have a sustainable, means of working. And also to implement standards, standards by which people work, standards by which the industry stands, and, so that we hold people accountable. So we actually walk the talk on sustainability. So those are some strategies that I think that if businesses really look into it and put them into practice, then we can actually have successful businesses and thriving communities.
And I'm interested to understand what are the biggest opportunities that exist but remain untapped in supply chain collaboration, but specifically speaking to the public sector working with the private sector, and where the support is actually lacking and what can be done there.
I feel that in the public sector, because even in the private sector, I have recognized one huge gap, which I think the public sector could fill. The public sector as well, speaking as a business, and also I think to enhance, or rather for good collaboration, I think that the public sector really needs to work to know what is happening on the ground. That's the first thing. They need to know what's happening on the ground. That means there has to be a coordinated effort. Because if I look, like in my home country, Cameroon, you have ministries that work with different people, development and whatever on the field, women and whatever. They have activities and they run their own show fine. But now when it comes to public sector procurement and everything, is when we launch out these bids, the criteria we set on the bids, we do not integrate that there are organizations, maybe grassroots organizations, that can provide the services that we need. We're only looking for a certain type of vendor, we're looking for a certain type of vendor, who are public contractors and whatever. But meanwhile, you have organizations that have been trained. They have the ability and the aptitude to provide these services, maybe with a little bit of, it's coming in French, maybe with a little bit of assistance and support, but they can also do it. So I feel that there should be a board in every country. We should have an organization that has a big overview of what is happening on the field, what nonprofit organizations are doing in terms of programs and whatever, and training, and to know what skills and aptitudes are out there, and that the public sector should also, to integrate sustainability, rethink how they issue out their bid packages. They should be more inclusive. And that they don't, they don't target only a particular kind of vendor. That they should be more inclusive and integrate people at grassroots and in the communities, so that everybody has an opportunity at growth. Because that's the thing, very few people have exposure to opportunities to grow and to even showcase the skills that they have. So this is not only, I'm glad you brought this up, it's not only an issue in the private sector of trying to do this because everybody's societal responsibility, shared value. It's more enhanced and talked about in the private sector, but the public sector has a lot of work to do, and I think it will even carry more weight than with the private sector.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I just want to bring Godfrey in there. And Godfrey, in your view, how do we then advance borderless supply chains in Africa to foster this collaboration and sustainable African supply chains?
Okay. Thank you very much, Thato, and thanks a lot, Elizabeth. For me, I think we should first start with legislation. I mean, let's take, for example, South Africa does a lot of business with Zambia. South Africa does a lot of business with the likes of DRC. And these are the countries that are on the opposite sides. So they have to cross through Botswana to do business. But what I've noticed is that the legislature or the tariffs at the borders, the bureaucracies, the boxes that need to be ticked in order to get a bag of orange from one country to the other is way too much. I think that's where we need to start. We need to start, lessening the restrictions of importations and transferring goods from one country to the other. I'll tell you, for example, right now, to get anything from Zambia to Botswana, it takes 2 to 3 days, a truck waiting there. And truck waiting there costs a lot of money. The same thing with Zimbabwe. We do a lot of business with Zimbabwe. To take anything across is just one lot of work. So for me, that's the first thing. And secondly, we also have to look into infrastructure. Like I already said, Botswana, South Africa does a lot of business with Zambia, and we see Zambian trucks crossing the country every day. But imagine if we had a railway that goes in, from South Africa to Zambia, across Botswana, or South Africa to DRC, across Botswana, and Namibia as well. So these are two things for me that stand out, that I think, they can, speed up this borderless supply chain. They can, optimize the way we do business with one another inter-country. So for me, that's a good start. Thanks a lot.
Ask from your perspective, when collaboration can it be a liability rather than asset? And what do you see in your experience?
I believe the answer is yes and no. I believe that collaboration is always going to be the key to our joint success. With that said, when we look at sustainability and when we look at an impact, if we're focusing on the impact, very much like what Elizabeth was saying, and I agree so strongly with everything Elizabeth mentioned, which is that at the end of the day, we're looking at this from how to reach the grassroots, how to give opportunities to people. If we are collaborating in such a way that we're taking those opportunities away from others, in the sense that, for example, you can have someone who's coming in and saying, no strings attached, here's an opportunity, you do this and then I'll offload it for you. Let's, I know if from in my field where we empower women in the field of agriculture, specifically we work with mushrooms, a business that would come in and say, we'll cover all the costs, we'll cover all your training, here's the farm, you don't even have to buy the farm. At the end of the day, you haven't empowered anybody. And there is this possibility for excessively overstepping that desire to collaborate and never offering the independence that is required to make real change, and never offering the opportunities. And everybody has a role to play, exactly like Elizabeth was saying. The grassroots have to do what the grassroots do, and the government has to do what the government does, and no one should ever be trying to play the other person's role. So there's the liability comes from overstepping your boundaries, and the solution is the flip side of that same thing, where everyone knows what they have to offer, what they're strongest at, and what they're weakest at, and what someone else should be stepping in and playing their role. And so I think much to continue exactly off of where Elizabeth started, that give and take with everyone leveraging their own advantage and respecting everyone else's advantage is where we really see collaboration at its absolute best.
Hepsy, you deal a lot more with big corporate, specifically around the linkage of small business into their supply chain. What do you think, possibly if you can comment on Tzippora and Elizabeth, where they're saying each needs to keep their lane? So what are the strategies that big organizations should be doing, and what should they not be doing? And, how then can they also still meet their commercial objectives while working with small business?
Okay, thank you for that, Debbie. So in the last 21 years, I've been involved in designing and developing programs to integrate small businesses into supply chain. And moved forward in 2020, I recognize a gap in the market. And the gap is that within a corporate itself, there are very siloed approaches towards developing small businesses. And digging deeper to that problem, I realized that it has everything to do with the lack of technology being utilized to coordinate, collaborate, and support each division to drive the same mandate. So you find that in any corporate, there are about 4 stakeholders that are involved in supporting small businesses, and their mandate is to integrate them. You find that there's corporate affairs, and the corporate affairs mandate is to develop a pipeline so that stakeholders in, near, and around an operation are considered when there are opportunities. So their job is to really go and find out from their communities that they operate, how can we uplift you by ensuring that aspects of procurement are headed towards those communities. Of course, you're not going to find communities who are ready to execute because they have limitations. And those limitations mean that someone has the fund to develop them. And therefore, corporate affairs has a budget to do so. So their role is to then create the pipeline so that the corporate can always have a pipeline to leverage when they need suppliers. Then you have supply chain, also a very opposing mandate on their side, and priorities are not the same. Their priority is to get quality suppliers. And we're talking about a community that might not have that quality supplier purely because they just don't have those resources. So you look at what they are required to do from a KPI perspective. The KPIs say that bring us quality suppliers that you can easily embed into our supply chain. So that means that a lot of people are left out in that scenario, right? Then you have your foundations, and foundations are given funds to unlock opportunities for the communities. But those funds tend to not speak to the pipeline that's being created for the same organization, so there's a sustainability in driving, in building supply chains. Then you have finance, or sorry, sustainability teams that want to report on what has been done. And everyone is just driving this from a siloed perspective. So how then do you coordinate and have one single view as a corporate or government entity when you're working in silos? So my view is that technology is really at the crux of that. So that's what I set out to solve with technology, to have a system that has workflows that can identify a problem from a perspective, but work towards a common goal as an organization. Then then you can have a sense of what are we doing organization-wide? Where should we be spending our funding? Whom should we be developing? Because you have SMMEs in the background asking for opportunities, closing your operations because they feel that they're not heard. And then you have the data, but it's haphazard. So you can't even communicate a cohesive story about what it is that you're doing. So I think that is basically the approach that we took around having observed some of the challenges that are faced within a corporate itself.
I think if you as a supply chain or procurement head are not really trying to integrate AI and technology into your sourcing process and then linking to these databases and these pipelines, you're 100%.
Thanks, Hepsy, for that. I just want to bring Arran in here, and I quickly want to talk about supply chain resilience and looking back, some of the challenges that we experienced with COVID and how that disrupted the entire continent or the entire globe. Now that we are post-COVID, what are the effects on the supply chain in Africa, but also maybe the strategies that can be used to build that supply chain resilience in African supply chains?
Thank you, Thato. After COVID, we experienced a material scarcity, which was mainly attributed to the reason why most of the companies, because they were not producing their goods or services locally. So we realized that some of the companies that were not producing essential goods or essential services, most of them, they've closed during the COVID era. So that's why most of the supply chains are now facing material scarcity around the globe. That's the effect number one. we are also experiencing increase in freight charges. I'm sure you can also agree, colleagues, that due to the scarcity of commodities on the market, it also prompted the price hike of freight charges. The statistics around the globe, it revealed that by the freight charges have gone up by 240%. So it's some of the effects that we also encountered as a result of the COVID era. You also realize that after the COVID era, we also realized the effect of port congestions. Goods are not being cleared on time on the port of clearing. I'm sure Godfrey also touched on that. This is an effect. This effect is also affecting supply chain, particularly those who are in the manufacturing sector. At times, they lose the production time. You will be having employees that will come to work to do production, but at times you would not have the raw materials because of the port congestion at the border posts. And the statistics also revealed that the port congestion, it has also gone up by 25% if you are to check the statistics. Maybe just to go on to the strategies that companies can also use or can also adopt to ensure that they create a supply chain resilience. First and foremost, they need to develop a strong corporate culture. By developing a strong corporate culture, management will be able to solve some of the problems that they encounter because they will be aware of their problems. I can give you an example of Apple. Is a very good example where the owners or the shareholders are enjoying the benefits because they've developed a strong corporate culture. You can also employ the Six Sigma supply chain matrix, which is aimed at improving the process efficiency. The advantage of the Six Sigma supply chain is that it allows identification of problems, and it also stops the problems from happening. So that's another strategy that can also be adopted by supply chain functions. We can also apply or employ the just-in-time approach, particularly for the companies that are in the motor industry. I think you also agree with me that those who are in the motor industry, there is no need at times to order many spares and keep them in stock because it's a cost to the organization. So supply chain professionals should be proactive and ensure that they apply appropriate strategies that solve their own problems, because some of these problems, they need tailor-made solutions.
Into the conversation. And just to add on what Arran just said there, Godfrey, how can we prepare for similar pandemics in the future and ensure that supply chains are not interrupted in the manner that we've seen?
Thank you very much, Thato. Arran, thank you very much for touching on that. I mean, we can all agree how exposed we were, when COVID-19 came. I think most of us were not prepared. It came and we tried to do what we can in the limited time and we failed. I mean, if you look at the statistics, I think about 80% of all the vaccines in Africa are actually imported from Europe and Asia. So for me, I think perhaps this is the time now, to look internally and try to invest internally in the research and development. And of course, another issue is academia. I mean, all my 20 years in supply chain, at only one point in time that I've seen a specific module that talks about humanitarian and disaster supply chains. And that was run by a university in Kenya. I think back in the bottom of Africa, I think because not many things happen, we kind of forget that something will happen eventually someday. So we relax, and then when it happens, we panic. When you talk, I mean, Arran spoke about the just-in-time supply chain as well. Each country locally has something that is good at. So instead of every country producing everything, we can collaborate. We can make cargoes in Botswana, and then Namibia can make car hooves, and then somebody else can make car wheels. So we don't have to make everything internally. I think that's why most of us fail. Another big example is in agriculture. I think Tzippora and Elizabeth spoke about trying to motivate the small men. If you look at agriculture, where currently I am, we have so much land than we actually need. So we can actually partner in those areas. We can bring in the expertise and carry out research and development here in what can we plow that is sustainable. And I think looking at the weather beer and the climate change right now, we are looking at very, very long years of droughts, I think, in Africa, especially at the bottom of Africa. So I think it's the time now that, we bring in experts, from the top there to come in and invest here locally, to try and do certain developments here locally on what we can plow, and then we can share with the rest of Africa. I mean, Zambia and I think most of the countries, they export their grains, across, into Asia, and we're just next door. I think that's some of the collaborations that we need to start, talking about and seeing how best we can enhance, the friendship and the collaborations and the research and development, and I think that way is a good step in trying to improve the African supply chains. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a panel discussion, so if you feel free to
Thank
jump
you. I want to take what Godfrey was saying and kind of take it one step further, because Godfrey was focusing on extremely important resilience from the perspective of COVID, from the perspective of climate change, and how we can take a system and strengthen it. And I agree, and would take it a step further and say what I think from a continental perspective, I think what we can most benefit from is strengthening the grassroots within the organization. Because, for example, what we saw in COVID and what we're seeing now with climate change is that the people who are most hit, not only do they not have a voice on the international stage to let people know that there's a problem. I mean, when you take a step back and you look at these massive disasters that are happening on a continental scale, internationally, people are entirely unaware. COVID was transparent from the world's perspective. What went on in Africa, many people aren't even aware. And the same is happening with climate change, and God only knows what'll be the next thing. And I think that if we can take supply chains, like everyone has been saying, take what Hepsy was mentioning about how we can integrate and empower from the small through these really well-positioned, massive organizations or corporates, whomever it may be. And like Elizabeth was saying, bring in the various players. And if we all kind of empower everyone to represent themselves, everyone to have a place on the global stage, then as we do the development that Godfrey's saying, as we bring the R&D in, then there'll be a bit of a leverage point. There'll be a voice to what's currently an entirely underrepresented or even a completely non-represented area or sections of the globe, sections within countries. And I think that empowering communities to have their own voice, to say, here is what we need. Maybe COVID is affecting the capital in this way, but here in our rural small community, it's affecting us entirely different. You need to know that, but they don't even know that they have the voice in the first place. And once we give them that voice, once they're empowered to speak, what do you say? How do you say it? When do you say it? And I think that empowering the continent and every aspect, every community, every individual within the continent to have their own voice is probably the best way for resilience in the future, because we don't know what the next massive disaster will be. We don't know what the needs will be. And we're going to need people from the bottom to the top to tell us what those needs are so that everyone relevant can then respond. And I think that giving voices to the underrepresented is probably the strongest path towards resilience.
Yeah. And Tzippora, just to add on that, I mean, the response.
Points.
You're
Hello,
welcome
Thato.
to.
Hello,
Yeah, you can add. Go.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Thank you. I
Yeah.
think what we also need to do is Africa, we need to localize our supply chain because I think from lessons learned from the COVID-19, most of the African countries, they were relying on European Union production value chain and China as well. And if you see the statistics, China, it accounts for almost 30% of the production around the globe. And most of the companies that failed to create supply chain resilience, they have suffered a lot. So I think going forth in future, we also need to localize our markets and equip our industries so that we can be able to produce on our own as Africa. I think that's my comment again on that.
Thank you, Arran. I just want to make sure I'm audible, or can you hear me? Okay, great. And I just wanted to add on Tzippora's comment around the responsibility that actually sits with the professionals across the industry in actually pushing that message across the board, and a responsibility to actually educate. So the people that are sitting today on this platform, it is our responsibility to actually drive that message and ensure that people across the continent are actually prepared and they're informed and they have all of this information in which they can actually use to protect themselves and to better gear for whatever future we headed towards. So there's a question that's popped into the chat, which I like, and anyone's welcome to pick up on it. But how can we strategically challenge regulations to empower SMMEs and enable them to see? You're welcome to jump in.
Okay, so I don't know. I think there are various instruments already in the market to facilitate this. Whether they are implemented effectively, I think that's the question. You have in our environment the BE legislation, which has your various elements that are geared towards that. In other areas, you have your SDG 8 that is used as a leverage to support small businesses. And of course, then there's your social aspect of ESG. So I think there's actually sufficient frameworks out there. The problem is implementation. The problem is common purpose. And we're not leveraging the right instruments to drive that. You have to leverage what's going to be impactful. So you follow the money, as far as I'm concerned. You look at leveraging corporates because of vested interest in ensuring that they are profitable. So how then do you bring SMMEs as part and parcel of that so that they are also getting, even if it's the crumbs from the corporates? I think that's important because that's the biggest instrument that they have. We can't continue to develop SMMEs for the sake of developing them without giving them access to markets. And they can't get access to markets if they don't have the right skills. So if you create your own wood, then you need to make sure that you start with development. Then some of those that have the right attitude will be able to do so. So I definitely think that we don't have to go and re-engineer frameworks. We just need to implement them. But the biggest aspect of it is just reporting on it. We don't report because we don't have the right tools to report. And so we have no visibility. So I think that's really my view around that. Yeah.
Yes. May I jump in?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Hepsy, you hit the nail on the head. Hepsy's right. The frameworks are there, but the implementation is a problem. We do not walk the talk. And I think in addition to reporting, the next step will be consolidating all this information and data. Because like I said, you also talked about the silos, people working in silos. This ministry, women and women development is working on its own, economic development is on its own, they have their own data, and but consolidate everything. There's a lot of work being done, but in silos, consolidate everything and bring it together, and we see that we're making some degree of progress. And again, SMMEs, I really feel that, policy should really change, because everything, these SMMEs, they are doomed to fail from birth, is a stillbirth, because there is nothing there, hardly any structures in place to support and accompany them. They create people, especially women-led businesses, they create the businesses, they have to pay tax, they have no knowledge about to pay tax. Nobody accompanies them, but the taxman comes. They want to look for funding. It's difficult. Certain sectors, you go to a bank and they say no. Oh, you're in apparel, you're in fashion. No. If you're in agriculture, maybe. If you're in this, maybe. But this one, we have nothing. We cannot give funding. So how do these businesses survive? So I feel that, yes, the frameworks are there, but they need a little bit of tweaking. They have to ease it a little bit so people can actually do it and it's easy. Maybe I think the whole problem is in the implementation, because when I look at the policies, or I read the laws, or I read the decrees that create these things, it's well documented, written and everything, but the implementation is a problem. So, and that's the big thing to chew. How do we, work on the implementation? So as Hepsy said, corporate, they have a say, they have some influence. And if the SMMEs can pick up on the crumbs, and I just hope that, I was saying that I do believe that there has to be this body that consolidates all of these things for the grassroots, the small SMMEs, and documents it and reports, and that government should be a little bit, rigorous in asking for accountability and results from this organization that oversees SMMEs and their implementation and how the ease in which they have to do business. I think that's a starting point. And again, education, education. People need to be aware. People need to be aware of what it is, to create an SMA and to do it. And I believe that the non-profit sector, doing all this work and everything on capacity building, and also donors, people who sponsor, who give grants, on things, should really look at the scopes, scope first the ground, the field, find out what the real issues are, and to target the solutions, implement solutions that really solve problems, especially for creating a business. I worked for corporate for 20 years. Now I'm an entrepreneur. It's night and day. It's a nightmare. There have been many times I've wanted to drop the ball, but I just keep going. The experience I got from corporate is helping me plow on, but it's not easy. For me who has the experience, and I think about the person who has no knowledge at all. Everything is just set for us to be crooked in business, because even when you want to do things ethically, the systems in place do not facilitate that for entrepreneurs. And so I believe that procurement professionals, they hold a lot of power that they do not realize. You're working for a company, you're working for the government, and you're a procurement professional. You go out there asking for services and for goods. You play a very critical role. You play a very critical role. Yes, we want to buy a bolt, but how do you ask for that bolt from the market? Is your demand inclusive, or is it targeting just a special person? So procurement professionals have a key role to play in this, because they're the third party interface. They spend the money for the government or for corporate or organizations. So how do you spend that money? Are you inclusive? Do you ask questions that gives everybody or most people an opportunity to answer the questions? Do you tap into the skills and resources that are out there in the market? Or are you blindsided, or are you looking just a particular sector because maybe it's easy? So I feel that platforms like this and these talks that we're having is really to tell procurement professionals the power that they have to bring upon positive change, we can bring upon positive change, because they say he who has the money, he's the piper, right? He plays the tune. So if you sing the sustainable song, everybody will dance the sustainability dance, and we will work on this shared value. So I think this is the right place to have this discussion, because as they say in Nigeria, procurement professionals have the yam and the knife. Thank you.
And if I can add to that, I think that policy has quite a bit of a role. I think policy has a bit of a role to play here, because we talk about collaborating, and there's no. Can you hear? I very quickly wanted to add that I believe that, we're talking about collaborating. We're talking about the need to have, it should be in the corporate's best interest to collaborate with SMMEs. But in order to have that be in their best interest, you have two options. The SMMEs need to make a really strong case. And we all know that less than 1% of them will, which means someone else needs to make the case for them. The only person who has the power to do that is the government, is policy saying, we will give you a reason to look to source from SMMEs. We'll give you a reason to give them that voice, to give them that chance. So, and so either we have the government stepping in and giving the corporate a reason to work with SMEs, or we have somebody else stepping in and empowering the SMMEs to make that case for themselves. Both reach the same goals, but one's a lot more efficient and faster, and just a more practical way to get corporates to kind of turn their focus, like Elizabeth was saying, towards these more sustainable options.
Yeah, thank you, Thato. May I jump in and just add a few points? I also think that there is need for capacity building, like the colleagues that have been alluded to earlier on. Some of these guys, they lack competencies in certain areas. So there is need to capacitate them in a way that they know how to handle some business issues. I can tell you for a fact, professional branding is not taught at academic schools and all other colleges. It's some of the things that these guys are lacking. There is need for professional branding.
Okay, so I just want to respond
Go ahead, please,
to Arran. It's a very important point, and we often hear this a lot from supply chain specialists. So their problem is that we don't know who these SMMEs are, what they are capable of delivering, what their needs are. At the same time, they are not putting any solution forward around how to solve for that. So how we've decided to solve for that is to make sure that we grade SMMEs. So we have a grading process where we grade SMMEs from blue, bronze, silver, gold, platinum. And to avoid exactly that type of question, that in the pool of SMMEs that we have, yes, some of them might not be exactly where you want them to be, but some have been developed extensively. They are now ready for opportunities. So we can't then apply the same thinking across for all of them, because it's not all of them. We need to differentiate which ones still need support, which ones are ready for opportunities. And that has really been the question from the supply chain teams, that Hepsy help us then to have an automated view and to have workflows that help us to identify which ones are ready, which ones are not ready, how long will it take for the ones that are in the pipeline to be ready. On my side, I say to them, then give us the opportunities so that they can start to see what opportunities are coming up in 6 months' time, and what is required for those opportunities to be ready, so that those who are at gold know exactly that they have 6 months to close the gap. But those that are platinum should be able to have access immediately, because they've proven that they're capable. They've delivered for someone before. But then the tendency is to just say SMMEs aren't ready. And so we've now gone to solve for that, because the ERP systems that exist in corporates don't solve the problems of localization. There's not enough market for them to go and customize for this market. So that's why we've brought in Linkage, to really close that gap of SMMEs being given opportunities based on their level of readiness. So that then tracks their level of readiness and allows them to say that, okay, if I want to get to gold, I must do this, that. If I want to get to platinum, I must do this, that. Then it puts the onus on them. How much do you want this opportunity? What are you willing to do to get it? So now they're empowered and they know exactly what to do to get to the next level. So someone from procurement must then
Thank you so
go and
much.
source suppliers. Yes.
Thank you so much, Hepsy. There's one more question I just want to take from the chat, and I think I wouldn't be doing this conversation justice if I didn't. Then I know we've went over time, but I'd like to ask one of the panel members to actually take this, but it's regarding the matter of
Can't hear you, Thato.
Thato, we can't hear you. Are you able to just point in the chat which one, or just paste it?
Yeah, let me paste it. I just pasted the question in the chat.
No problem. I'll ask it. Regarding the matter of lead time and supply chain between countries on our continent, is the discussion of strengthening infrastructure, rail and road per se a feasible one? The question refers to creation of bridges in strategic positions with aims to cut down travel. For example, the Nusbaum Bridge, which will cut down truck travel by 3 hours from a current route itinerary. This project costs 1.5 billion. However, it will create immense value for the freight forwarding industry. The question, I just need to scroll up, I did see this one as well. The question is, why are we not seeing bigger and larger projects across the continent? Is it because of financing? Could tolling these routes not provide returns on investment? Why aren't large corporations embarking on PPP endeavors? Who from the panel would like to give a commentary on that? Thank you, Godfrey.
Through you, Thato. Well, perhaps this is the time for Botswana to brag in that area, because we remember we have done the same thing. We have built a multi-billion-dollar bridge across Zambia and Botswana, so to try and make logistics easier. That's the same bridge that now instead of taking 10, 20 days to cross into Botswana from DRC and from up Africa, it now takes a few days or a few hours. For me, I think a triple P is a great opportunity. I think many countries, they can learn from what Botswana has done and hopefully spread it across Africa. And of course, tolling the roads will also help, recover the funds that were used to build the bridge, and along the bridge as well, and across, the villages in the area. Small MMEs, they sprouted as well because of the bridge. Tourism as well in the area, it went up. So for me, I think Botswana has done a very good start, and I think a lot of countries can, learn from that angle.
Can we just have a last 30 seconds from each panelist? Just as the screen shows from my side, maybe starting with Tzippora, your final, what would you change comment to this audience? What can they think about actioning within their scope of influence?
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to participate today. I think what I would want to see is a combination of what's been said today. I would want to see the understanding that there's talk and there's action, and choosing actionable items that make a difference, such as empowering your supplier, your procurement professionals to scout out the SMMEs and giving those SMMEs the power and the voice and the understanding to present themselves in a practically relevant manner to those businesses. I as a social business, I have my job of helping them and bringing people to that point. But given the forum where we are now, which is a forum of supply chain professionals, I would want to see the professionals in this context, recognizing who's on the other end and trying to take actionable steps towards leveraging the potential of impact that is in their hands.
Thank you, Tzippora. Elizabeth?
Thank you so much. I've had a wonderful time in this discussion. And what I would really like to say is I would really like to buttress on the importance of, collaboration, of cross-sector collaboration. It is really very important that we create ecosystems, and this bears a lot on the government to create an ecosystem where collaboration, is encouraged, facilitated, and sustained. And I still insist, or I still strongly believe that we also need an intermediary. And I think Hepsy might be that intermediary, to an extent, but I think we need also the governments to, find an intermediary to create this link between the SMMEs and the corporate and the non-governmental, non-profit organizations, because we're only looking at the strictly business or corporate side. But everybody has to come together because these are all key stakeholders, These are all key stakeholders. So I believe that this intermediary body, can act as a catalyst, to foster understanding, more cohesion. And I come back and I agree with you, Tzippora. Supply chain professionals, procurement professionals, you have the yam and the knife. You have the power to educate. You have the power to implement change. Please use it. It means a little bit more work, but it's worth it. In my time as a procurement professional, I took a lot of training. You bring bids. People are only interested to bring offers where they say, oh, it costs this. But you have to educate them. Do they understand the terms of the bid? Do they understand what is required? Do they know what safety is? Do they know that safety has a cost? Do they know that sustainability has a cost? And it's all there in your bid, but you have to put it down in a language that they understand. You have to put all your legalese in your terms of reference, but you need to break it down so people can really understand what it entails to see if they are ready. And I think Hepsy's linkage is already making people aware of what is required of them. Nobody is asking anybody to compromise on quality. Everybody deserves the best, but we have to raise everybody up at the same time because, like I said, a good business operates in a thriving community. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And Arran, it's you have the sword, apparently, or the knife to make it happen. What's your closing remark?
Thank you very much, Deb. I think the key takeaways is sustainability and value for money is not only for the procurement professionals alone, it's the duty for everyone. There is need for communities and the procurement professionals and the government as well to work together. There is no need to work in silos if you need to achieve a certain goal, a certain objective. So I would like to implore on procurement professionals to ensure that they get the requisite skills that is needed, especially when you are managing a large contracts. Managing and monitoring of large contracts, I'm sure you will also agree with me that it requires a lot of collaboration. So collaboration is very important in supply chain. I think that will be my closing remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arran. Godfrey?
Madam. Thank you very much for the opportunity. This has been a great session. I'll say I think we also need, to start demanding accountability. For over the years, I've seen, the government, throwing money into the development of SMMEs. SMMEs, they eat the money, they don't do anything, and then life go on. I think we need to be deliberate going forward. We need to get everybody to be accountable, and then going forward, then everybody should stand up. And at the same time, I think we should also do the best we can to collaborate with the private institutions. They seem to be doing very well in that area. Let's try to separate SME development, and opportunities with politics as well. Because once politics come in, it changes the game altogether. That's my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you. And to link it all together from our lady from One Linkage, Hepsy?
I think maybe my remarks are around a case study that maybe I'd like to share just a little bit of, where a corporate has just been very deliberate in how they bring in SMMEs closer to their operations. And I think what they've understood is transparency. How do SMMEs get opportunities? And their answer was, we are going to be transparent in terms of what we're looking for, how you prepare for it, how will enable you to prepare for it. So they've then implemented the system to do so. So they have a good view of the landscape, the pipeline, and have a deliberate system that is dedicated for SMMEs only, so that they can track and monitor their efforts vis-a-vis what they do for other corporates and set aside opportunities specifically for those SMMEs. I think for me, that case study, particularly because I'm quite involved in it with Sasol, they've done incredible work in ensuring that they carve a niche for small businesses and have a system that really looks at their needs and then collaborate in solving those problems. So I think that case study can really trickle down into other areas. That's my personal words, yeah.